What's good, guys? I've just been setting up OBS on my system for some podcasting and streaming projects I've got going on. More details on that to follow. And I thought it would be a good opportunity for me to record some videos imparting some of the production knowledge I picked up along the years of my musical journey, because I quite often get emails and DMs from people asking for advice or for hints and tips on production, and specifically relating to garage, because obviously that's kind of my forte. So with that said, if you give me a few minutes of your time today, I'm going to try and do a simple video to run you through the basics of producing a pretty sick two-step beat. Now I've got Serato Studio open on the screen in front of me. First thing I would say is the principles that I'm going to be discussing are going to apply regardless of what DAW you're using, so don't be put off by the fact I picked Serato. The reason I picked Serato is because it's really clear and simple and easy to explain, and I'm crap at explaining things. So I'm hoping it's going to assist me in breaking down that barrier that I have, and hopefully that way you can get something from this. If you look in the top left-hand corner of the screen, you'll see I've set the BPM to about 130. That's a typical ballpark figure for garage and two-step. You may speed up or slow down as you go through, but I would suggest starting with that. If you look to the right of the screen, you'll see the drum matrix, or what we used to refer to as a step pattern. And basically what that is, it's one bar of audio split into 16 segments. So if you hear me refer to something as a 16th, I'm talking about one of these tiny itty bitty little squares going through, and we're going to put drum hits on those triggered throughout to make a beat. Now the most important tip I'm going to give you today is about sound selection, and I think when producing drums for any genre it's important to make sure that your source material is appropriate and sounds like the genre you want, because if you're starting with stuff that's out there or not appropriate, no matter what you do, your drums are frankly just going to sound a bit crap. Some people like to recycle hits from old garage tunes, maybe sample some vinyls. Myself, I have quite a sort of clinical, pristine sound with my productions, and for that I quite like to use a lot of the Cymatics drum hits because they're punchy and they're clean and they're royalty free as well, which is quite handy. So the first thing we're going to do is select a kick that suits the part, and that's perfect. Now if you look here at the start, you'll see there's a bit of sort of run up to there's a bit of an attack before it actually hits, so I'm going to adjust that so that's a bit more it's a bit more instantaneous. And then I'm going to duplicate that here on a second pad here, and I'm going to give this a short release time so it's a bit clickier, and I'm going to take the volume down. And the reason I'm doing that is because obviously with 4/4 drums you've got that 4/4 beat that drives things along, and I'll just show you what I mean. But when you start making two-step, you remove some of those beats, so you need to create rhythms in order to push things along and create interest. So I like to do that with both hats and kicks. Okay, next we're going to need a short snappy snare. That kind of sounds perfect. And I'm going to put a tiny amount of short decay reverb on the snare. Be careful not to overdo it if you copy me doing that, because if you put too much reverb on your drum hits, you'll add character but you'll reduce the impact of them. Now the snares you can get a bit creative with. I'm just going to go with a basic snare on beats 2 and 4 of the bar, because that gives that drive. But you know, you might want to, as you go through, you might want to get a bit more experimental. You can do all sorts. We'll keep it simple for the time being. Next we're going to go with some hi-hats. So I've got two closed hi-hats here, one of them slightly more open than the other. I like to do that because you can kind of alternate between them to create a bit of rhythm. Now one thing you'll notice with garage, and the hats in garage in particular, is they usually have these quite short release times. So I'm going to set this to around about 200 milliseconds, but you can change this just so they're a bit clickier, right? And then what I will always do with my drums is I will remove the low end, and it's particularly handy with hi-hats because you don't need a lot of the low end. The reason I do this, and you won't necessarily be able to hear that at a click, but when you start listening really loud and you're the mixing down stage, you would notice a little bit of rumble there. I'm removing that rumble so that when I come to add bass in, there's more space for that bass to breathe. Because the worst thing you can do with your tracks when it comes to the mix down stage is have things clashing and have loads of low end in loads of your sounds, because it just ends up sounding really muddy. So with that done, I'm ready to start laying down a little bit of a rhythm. Some people like to hit these in with their keys. I've actually had to disable my MIDI keyboard for the time being because my 8-month-old son is getting very handsy and keeps bashing at it, which can be quite distracting when I'm working, but I'm quite happy clicking things in. So I'm going to position these. I'm going to do this kind of open hat on the offbeat. I'm going to add a couple of extra bits with this closed hat in, just for a little bit of rhythm. Now I can hear listening back to that, the hats need to come down in volume a little bit, because you want your kick and your snare to be the main protagonist of your rhythm. Much better. I also like to use these acoustic-y open hats just in between to create a little bit of interest. So we'll stick one of those in place of that hat there. I'll remove that as well actually. There you go, sounding very phonetics-esque already. Some people will use percussive sort of snares trimmed down, or rim shots. I've got these sounds here which I thought were pretty cool. So I'm going to put these in, I'm going to reduce the decay time like I did with the hats so they're a bit snappier. I'm going to take the volume of them down quite a bit because I want them to be subtle in the background. And I'm going to stick those in there just to create a bit of interest. So you hear that's starting to sound like a good two-step beat, but it's not swinging the way two-step beats do. Now you see you've got a swing knob here, and you'll have this in any DAW that you've got. There's always a knob or a setting where you can adjust the swing, and what this does is it moves along these offbeat sixteenths. So these ones here that I'm highlighting, it moves these along ever so slightly to create a feeling, a kind of swing, and that's what gives garage it's very shuffled and distinctive sound. Now I'm going to whack this up to 30, 35, something like that, and hopefully you're going to hear the difference. You hear the drums now swing a lot better. I'm going to expand that to 2 bars, and Serato is very good for this. It automatically copies that first bar into the second bar, and I'm going to add some extra percussive hits. And then I'm going to do the same again, and you'll see if I go to bars 3 and 4 it copies the whole lot across again. I'm just going to add like a little thing at the end there, just to kind of round things off. So let's have a listen back to that, and hopefully we've got something which sounds pretty authentically garagey, two-step-esque. And there you go, that's two-step drums for you in a few minutes. Hope that's of help. Got any questions? Do feel free to drop in my DMs, and if you haven't yet taken a minute to listen to my album Jazz Step FM, you're going to hear lots of this kind of drumming and a bit more experimental stuff on there. Please take a second to go and check it out. phonetics.co.uk for more info and download links.